Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Max Murray. I'm the head of games and entertainment for Faceware and the host of today's webinar. As you know, every month Faceware hosts industry professionals to talk through their expertise related to facial animation or motion, or a notable client of ours that's working on some sort of unique project that we want to highlight. If you missed any of these, including our chat with Melinda Ozell a couple weeks back, where we talked about FACS, the facial action coding system, you can find all of them on our GoToWebinar portal. But today, I'm pleased to welcome Keith Arem, the CEO of PCB Productions. Keith has been in the audio industry for decades, and he's captured hundreds of hours of performance audio tracks for the video game industry. In the course of his career, he's helped solidify an audio and face capture workflow, which is actually what he'll be talking about today. Hey, Keith, welcome.
Hey, Max. Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Really pleased to have this year here and talk through all this with everybody that's joining us. But before I pass it off to you, I just want to remind everybody, I know we got a bunch of viewers that are still trickling in, and all of you guys that joined us today, I want to remind everybody that we're doing Q&A for this. So if you have any questions on anything that Keith's going to go through, or as me and him start talking through everything later, in the GoToWebinar panel here, you'll have a questions pad. If you can type anything you want in there, I'll be going through, filtering stuff out, and making sure we get as many as we can with Keith. So yeah, don't hesitate to start asking questions at any point. We're just going to save the Q&A until after the presentation. But Keith, I don't want to take any more of your time, man. I'm going to pass it over to you, and you take it away from here.
Well, thank you thanks for having me. And boy, I feel very old after that introduction. It's interesting.
Don't feel old.
Yeah, working in the game industry for the past 20 years, more than that, you kind of start to develop a whole handful of experiences and memories and other things that you reflect on. And as you do that, you know, a lot of times we talk about we're only as good as our last project. And in this case, you know, with 20, 30 years of experience in the game industry, I'm just delighted that I can share some of our experience and our pipeline that we're actually been developing over the past decade to sort of take all that experience and put something to good use and share that with everybody. So thank you for having me here. So we're talking about a process that we've created that most people know as Vocap, and it's a performance capture pipeline. And it sort of reapproaches the way that we look at performance capture, voiceover, facial capture, a lot of different aspects. And just to preface this is not necessarily a means to replace what our industry has been doing. It's something to supplement and to kind of consider some of the pipeline that we've all been working with from different perspectives. And my perspective is more from a director, from a performance side. I direct dialogue and facial and mocap and animation, a lot of different aspects, but a lot of it we're looking from the performance side. So for those of you who come from an animation background or a different technical background, we're sort of looking at what's the best way to achieve a technical performance with a creative overlay. And that's sort of what Vocap is meant to embrace. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself that Max already made me feel so comfortable with, but thank you, is that I've been working, I started working in the game industry in the early 90s. I was the audio director for Virgin Interactive and then for Electronic Arts Pacific. I ran those studios for about 6 or 7 years and then started PCB Productions. Now we're close to somewhere between 650, 700 titles coming in over the years, and had the honor to work with just some of the best development teams, the guys from all the different Call of Duty teams and the Ghost Recon, the Rainbow Six teams, and we're working on the new Street Fighter projects and games like Sleeping Dogs and Saints Row that were really pioneering a lot of this early performance capture elements are now working their ways into the new Yakuza titles and other projects that's there. And also getting to work with celebrity performers and seeing how the film and television industry has sort of overlapped and collided and really worked synergistically with our industry over the past several decades. It gives you a lot of insight as to what works and what doesn't and what are some best practices. And getting to work on these games, you see the good and the bad and the ugly. And as creatives, most of the time, we're trying to create something that it's not about the money. It's about doing something right the first time and putting all your creative juices into something and really making that work. And so as you start to work on set and work in the studio and in pre-production and in post-production, there are some things where the amount of work that you have always contracts and expands based on the time you have available, right? Just kind of the law of nature of how we work in the game industry. And so what happens is that you start to see that you think you have more time than you do, or you finally get presented with a problem that you didn't foresee, and it gets sort of passed down the chain. And so a lot of times when we're working in audio and in post-production, we're sort of getting a lot of that. And so the PCB fire department has been kind of a joke of ours, because we're always putting out fires because things just get passed down to us over the years. And so what I wanted to do is sort of address those issues, at least with our projects and our clients, and start to look at the things that were causing us a little bit of pain. And so by looking at it from a couple different perspectives, looking at it from a director's perspective, from what our talent and the performers and the actors have to go through, and also the post-production team in our studios that we have to deal with. And so some of those core challenges that you're finding that we have to go with, starting with like a director, when we're trying to capture amazing performances and great performances that are going to be embedding both the physicality of the actor, the voice of the actor, and the facial animation, trying to capture all of that at the same time is the sort of the golden sort of target that we're all looking for, because that's what we most think about when we see a motion picture being made or a television show, is getting actors together, having them to perform, and getting these incredible performances. And it really is, when it works and you have all the resources together and the perfect talent and everyone's rehearsed and the perfect technology and the perfect space and everything is there, it is magic. But 80–90% of the time, there are deficiencies in that, and that's either it comes at a very high cost, tremendous amount of time, huge amounts of casting and trained talent and trained staff to be able to get there. And as a result, 1 to 5% of those projects, really all the stars align and you get exactly what you want. But most of the time we're finding that we are having to fix something in the mix. And so some of those core challenges we start to see start to come out in all these different trades. So from a director standpoint, when I want to get an entire cast together, bringing that cast at one time is a tremendous challenge. Getting one actor to come in for a session is hard enough, especially if it's a celebrity actor, but getting someone to come in and to perform for 2, 3, or 4 hours is a challenge. Getting 3, 4, 6, 8 actors all coming together, getting that availability combined with celebrities and their schedules, or just sort of the overview of what we need to do, becomes a bit of a challenge. And and there's different types of performers, because you have voice actors, you have stunt performers, you have people who specialize in different aspects of performances. And so finding those actors coming together and performing is a challenge. And even if you have a great voice actor or celebrity, in the scenes you're creating, you might have to grab stunts. You might have to grab some physical motions that that actor may not be able to do. So now we're going to have to get another actor to come in, which sort of defeats the purpose of kind of grabbing all the performances together. So that also is that when we're working on a lot of performance capture, we have an increased number of lines, especially compared to other forms of entertainment. An average television show runs about 300 lines of dialogue for about a half-hour show, and you're looking at about 1,500 lines of dialogue for a motion picture, for the entire script for that. Average game for us right now, we're starting one next week that's about 48,000 lines of dialogue. We have another one starting later that's about 85,000 lines of dialogue. We're recording somewhere between 40 to 90 lines of dialogue per hour in the voiceover booth. And on set, when we're doing mocap, we're doing maybe upwards of 12 to 15 pages per day. And in comparison, a film, we might shoot 2 to 3 pages of dialogue a day with close-ups, whereas here we have these long scenes that are 1 to 3 or 4 minutes, and trying to be continuous scenes based on the number of cameras we have rolling and not being able to cut away from those. And because of the sets that we're recording when we're doing performance capture, generally even the best treated sets, and I've had the honor to work on so many amazing stages, from the Ubisoft ones in Montreal, the Sony ones both in San Diego and up here, everyone from House of Moves and What Giant and the Manhattan stages. Everyone has done amazing treatment to their stages, but they're big, they're huge rooms. And the consideration that we have is that we can hear that when we're recording. So when we have these really nice microphones that we use in the studio, we're using very small lav mics on set that have to occlude all of that sound. So we're having a lot of fidelity issues when we're trying to capture all of this. Plus, we're capturing so much. We're capturing movement, we're capturing facial, we're capturing dialogue all together. And that ends up putting a lot of strain on a director, because you're trying to watch everything, the stunt that happened, the blocking, the eye lines, listening for the dialogue, making sure the timing between everyone is there. And if even one eye line or one piece of dialogue is wrong, and we run it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and each scene might have slight performance differences that we'd like to correct, where there's a misread line or the eye line just isn't exactly what we want, we have to decide, are we going to fix that in post-production, or are we going to take another take? Doing another take with the cast and the crew is very expensive. Doing it in post-production means we now have to match a lot of elements to then replace that. And so that's sort of what we're dealing with on the direction side. And there's many other aspects to that, but that's sort of the basis. From an actor's perspective, they're sort of on the receiving end of a lot of these things. So there's a lot of performance issues, because if you are doing a scene that is 1, 3, 5 minutes, that means memorization is super important, being able to block and rehearse and working with other actors. Each actor has a different method of acting, whether they're memorizing their lines, whether they're playing off of someone else's lines, whether they've pre-blocked it out themselves. So there's a lot of rehearsal issues for actors in terms of how they get to doing that. And a voice actor who's coming to do a mocap shoot is much different than a theater actor versus an on-screen film or television actor. And sometimes, because we're going to be bringing in a celebrity or replacing someone, a lot of times you're not working with the final cast on set. You might have a stunt performer coming in or a stand-in actor. On several of the Call of Duty games that I did, we had some celebrities that were not going to be available for the mocap. So we had pre-recorded some dialogue and would fly it in to a stand-in actor who was then working with all the other cast in real time. So that presented a lot of issues for both that actor and the actor, the celebrity voicing that. And when these actors are on set, you don't have the benefit of working with standardized props, not final costumes. You don't know necessarily what the lighting is, what the makeup is. So it's a little difficult for some actors to kind of get past what they're seeing and use their imagination. It is a fantastic experience being on set doing performance capture, but you have a lot of these considerations, plus the number of lines you're trying to memorize. Some of them may have timing restrictions. They may have other issues that's there, and just the length of that scene puts a lot of onus on those actors. And as I mentioned, is if any of that isn't resolved during the shoot, that pushes things to the post-production side. And we're already in post having to deal with microphones that are recorded on set with these actors, and then you're coming into a soundproof recording studio with large diaphragm microphones, with engineers who are writing preamps and all of this high increased fidelity, and then you're trying to match audio recordings of actors running around with, moving around with all sorts of Velcro and other movement sounds and breathing, and microphones that have to be placed off axis sometimes, so they're not at the right distance. Smaller microphones, as I mentioned, plus they're fighting for where they are with the face cams. And a lot of times, an actor still just can't memorize or has a blown take. Even in the voice booth, they're having blown takes. So then you're forced to go into ADR after the mocap shoot to then replace that dialogue. So you really only have one chance to correct that performance. And that's a little stressful. It means you can fix anything, but it's going to come at a cost. So I know that's a lot to digest, but that's sort of what we cry about in production. And again, when it all aligns perfectly and everyone memorizes their lines and everyone hits their marks and we've done a handful of takes and it comes out great, it is awesome. It is magic to hear this cast come together and everyone performing together and getting exactly the motion you want. And we do it every day, but it does come at a very hefty cost. And my feeling was that if you could look at other parts of our industry and the history of how animation and other performances have come together, maybe there's a different way to look at how we're doing things. And so that comes into this idea of vocap. And this is very much a streamlined pipeline that we sort of Frankensteined the elements of a performance into 3 stages. So we start off with a cast recording, where we're recording all of the performances, but doing it only with the voice. But we do it in a very specialized way, so we capture the magic of what's happening before we go into the physical and the performance capture that happens on a stage. And then the 3rd stage is going to be bringing that all together and doing some form of face cap and facial recording. And so we call this vocap kind of a combination of voiceover and performance capture, and that's why we call it vocap. And what we've found is over the years that this allows the actors, the directors, the animation directors, the post-production directors, everyone to focus on an individual aspect of something that we would normally push down to the end of the process or spend a tremendous amount of time at the beginning of the process only to maybe have to fix it in the end anyway. So we're getting these improved performances, much more efficient, and much higher fidelity as well. And so this 3-step process, I'm going to kind of walk you through it and show you a couple of examples and kind of walk you through it. So step 1 is doing a cast recording. And if you look at how companies like Pixar and other amazing animation teams have evolved, their philosophy has always been the voice and the performance originates with the actor initially with that performance. And that's not always the physicality. A lot of animation directors and animators that I've worked with over the years, guys who have come out of Disney and a lot of very high profile Academy Award-winning projects, have always said when they're looking for a performance to animate, they want a performance that inspires them to animate. The voice and the performance inspires them to do this animation. And so while in the game industry, we've used motion capture and a lot of other techniques as a means to increase the fidelity and the performance abilities, a lot of that performance still originates really with that voice. However, because games are so segmented and have to be interactive in a sense that they have to be manipulated from a time element and an implementation standpoint, and dialogue might not be able to have overlaps the way that normal conversations happen. Traditionally, we record dialogue 1 actor at a time in an isolated voiceover booth, which is nice. It sounds great, and you can control the performance. You can give them the lines. They can read the lines as they're doing, and you can work on performances that way. And arguably, that's the majority of how we see a lot of performances. And over the years, I've been able to work on hundreds of games using that technique. But you do see a deficiency in that, is that an actor, and I think a lot of acting comes from reacting. So if a director reads a line and says, okay, monster's coming from you and you're going to be reacting to this monster this way, but you have a history with this monster and you have this sort of performance that you're going for, the director is going to give you a feed that is going to inspire a performance. But if I have another actor working with this actor and giving that monster's feed and that dialogue, there's going to be a much different performance choice. And what that first actor hands off to the second actor, that reaction is the magic that happens in acting. That back and forth exchange between actors changes line per line. And if an actor tees up the second actor, that's a much different one than if an actor resolves his line and lets the other actor do their performance. So what happens is if you start to do a cast recording, you get a much more dynamic, natural performance because actors are trained instinctually to react to other performances. So that's what Vocap really starts with. It's voice over capture. You can now record actors together, and we use specialized headsets that move with the actors. They're at a perfect distance. We're not worried about body capture or facial capture at this moment. We're only doing isolated audio capture. But since each actor has their own microphone as a cast record, we can still isolate the dialogue. We can still cut it up and move it around independently for game implementation. And we can also record it solo as well. But now we're focused just on that voice. And we're not doing any calibration, any posing. But we are getting that natural performance cadence with other actors. And whether we choose to overlap or not, that can be decided by the directors in the moment. We can introduce breathing and movement. The problem with the static microphone is that if an actor is performing at a mic, that actor is shackled to that windscreen and that microphone and cannot get off axis. So if someone is yelling at someone over their shoulder, there's a strain to that performance that's very natural. If someone leans down and lifts something up, that's also a much different type of performance. And if that microphone is here and someone moves off axis, we lose that performance. But using some sort of HMC to be able to grab that performance and move with the actor and have multiple actors doing that, now you get the sound of what mocap is really known for, but you're getting it in a sound treated studio with very high quality performance microphones, with engineers addressing every single microphone, and you're pre-blocking all of these scenes. You're actually moving through a volume that is very similar to a mocap set. And so it serves as almost a rehearsal for the actors to be able to block what we're going to be doing in mocap anyway. And that helps the animation directors, it helps the performance directors, it helps the actors if they are also going to be doing those sessions later as that rehearsal. And because of the distance on the stage, you're getting that natural projection and most importantly, getting those reactions that we talked about. So those are all really amazing benefits that just naturally come from this idea of doing vocap. And because we have everything isolated, that means we can cut up and move this all around later. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to book our actors differently because it saves time and money on our booking, because now a celebrity who's not available for a 2-month mocap shoot might be able to come in for a 1-week vocap shoot. And that reduces our stage time with all of the other crew that has to be on a traditional performance cap. Like I said, it's also serving as a rehearsal if we decide to do that. And so what that allows us to do is now experiment more. We can run more takes. We can change out lines. So if an actor does a performance in take 1, but we like the end of take 3, in post, we can now edit that together. And we're not worried about sync issues with facial cap. We're not worried about body movement or stitching between different takes because we're only focused on audio. But we're getting the sound and all the elements and efforts of what that mocap set produces. And again, I'm not saying that this is the only way to do this. This is just something that we have found is an amazing way to spend a tremendous amount of time without spending a lot of resources to get these amazing performances. And a lot of times we also use this technique for animatics and previs. So we'll actually record all this dialogue and then we'll work on a previs just to lay out our scenes, and we can still replace the audio and still record this later on set and in post, and we'll get to that in just a second. So I'm going to share a little video with you real quick. This is just going to be just kind of an example of some of the vocap stuff that we've done in the past. And take a look, and I'll be right back. Here we go. All right, we're rolling.
Johnny?
Aisha.
Hold up. You cloned Gat?
Yeah.
All right, so where is...
I'm getting to that part.
Where's Shogo?
This is so awesome! Wait, where are you guys going?
We are going to find our friend.
Yeah, let's do this.
Sit the down, Jimmy. Leave this to the professionals.
Oh, man. Can you at least give me an autograph?
Awesome.
I love Jimmy so much it hurts my face.
All right, and let's just do this one a little bit faster.
So that gives you a little bit of an overview of sort of how that process goes. That was from Saints Row, and sorry for some of the profanity I had to kind of bleep out there or take it out. But a tremendous amount of fun because you get to run the lines very quickly. We're not all suited up. We're not doing posing. We're just working on these performances. And I can fly in different actors, even for cameos and other elements. And it really inspires the actors to learn their lines and really experiment with performances. So now we get to stage 2. So now we're moving on to performance capture. And this is traditionally where everything is done, right? So we've hopefully had some rehearsals. We've cast everyone. Everyone's available. We come to set, and now we traditionally would have to have microphones and face cams and all the stage set up and putting that all together. And that's what we've done for many, many years. And most animation directors and everyone else has been very accustomed to doing that. What we do a little bit different in the vocap process is, since we've pre-recorded the dialogue, now we're not so much focused on audio on set. Now I'm casting actors who are going to be doing their stunts, actors who can do all the motion and are going to be continuously being in the scene. And arguably, a lot of actors are trained for different sides of the industry. So some people are voice actors, some people are on camera actors, some people are stunt actors, some people can do everything. But to get an entire cast to do everything is always a challenge. And then once we bring in celebrity talent and other people, that adds to that mix. So by having the dialogue pre-recorded with exactly the performance we want, now we go to the mocap set and we're able to bring in other elements. Our timing now can be worked out. Our stunts can be blocked without having to replace actors there. We don't have to worry about all the body motion and the microphones fighting for placement. And the fidelity now, I don't have to worry about the giant stages sounding too echoed on the stage because I know I've got that there. I still can do it. I can still bring my microphones in. I can still record everything as I'd like to. But I can now bring in actors that maybe don't, they speak with an accent and it's not the right character, but they're amazing for the motion, or they don't have that performance ability there. They don't really need to worry about that. In performance capture, especially motion capture, the finest details are so noticeable. You can see different actors, their walk cycles. You can identify actors with the most minute movements. And so a lot of times you find that actors, the challenge is that if they are pre-recording and you do the mocap first and you're intending to do the ADR in post, a lot of times the mocap actors, because they're in the suits, they feel they have to over-articulate and over-gesture. And so you get these big, giant, huge movements. And it's a little frustrating as a director because you might be doing a very grounded, very realistic scene, and you want the movements to all be in here. And the actor feels that they have to act past the suit because they don't have their makeup and their props and they don't understand what it is, and they're feeling that they have all this space that they have to fill. So when they're hearing the vocap dialogue, it kind of grounds them, because if the performance is here, now they can't do these giant actions because their motion doesn't line up with the dialogue. And they don't have to worry about memorizing all of these lines because they're now being fed to them. And to not jump the lines, because a lot of times also an actor is anticipating a line, so they might be leaning into the line or missing the timing. So what we do in ADR and dialogue replacement is we have specialized cues that trigger when a line is supposed to be spoken. So if we're dubbing a show for Netflix, or we're doing an anime, or we're doing a cutscene, we have cues for the actor to know when their line is going to be there and get their timing down. So we use very similar cues on the mocap set, and we have all of the audio regions from the original dialogue that was approved in the vocap process all laid out. So with the sound system on set, we can now play back with the Pro Tools system. We can play back all the dialogue with cues for the actors. The actors aren't jumping their lines. If we have explosions or gunfire or sound triggers that have to happen, instead of a director having to yell out, explosion, boom, move over here, we can put that all timed out on a timeline and allow that to be perfectly executed. Just recently, just before COVID, we worked, I directed a project with NBC Universal and Sci-Fi, and it was a project called 1111, and it was a virtual reality experience, and the whole project took place in 11 minutes and 11 seconds, and it wasn't really a game, but it was a virtual experience that allowed you to kind of go through this world. And so I'm going to show you a brief little documentary we put together of how we did that process using vocap, and what would have been about 6 months of capture time, we ended up doing in about 6 weeks. So I'll show you a little of this, and then I'll be right back after this.
What I love about 1111 and the whole story that's progressed through this is that it was built as a cinematic narrative, but it was adapted into this world of virtual reality.
One of the reasons why we went with motion capture is because, you know, we have a tremendous amount of actors, we have a tremendous amount of characters, lots of life going on in this vast universe of 1111.
It's basically like recreating a film set for the actors and the director, but in a virtual sense.
What we try to do is anything that the actors can interact with, we will duplicate those, not exactly, but something that's akin to what's in the computer-generated environment.
One of the techniques we did in this project, which was really fascinating, is a technique that we call vocap. And it's a combination of voiceover and motion capture, where we bring all the actors together, we workshop each of those scenes, we block them the way we want, and then we record it and we get the performance.
As far as I'm aware, how many, if any, have ever really done this before, trying to create this multi-linear cinematic experience in one shot.
Everything has to happen in synchronization because we have a limitation of 11 minutes and 11 seconds.
I feel like it gels. You come in from one environment to the next, that is seamless.
People are going to want to go up to these characters and see them from different angles. Everything from how the hair looked, to be able to walk up close and to see some art on the wall in our villain's quarters.
Well, it's like you're doing theater in the round, right? Because instead of one camera where we can frame exactly what we want there, we have 200 cameras, and the viewer can move around all of those.
All right, so as you can see, a project like that, even if it was for a virtual reality project which had limited resources to be able to do that, we were able to actually use that performance capture to come together. So that leads into the last phase, which is our facial capture. And this is in place of ADR, but this is facial ADR. And this requires a completely different set of actors, potentially different process. And this kind of brings everything together in a unique way, because what this does is this allows us to now stitch together our face with our voice with the action that we've done. And we should at this point have final timed audio. We may or may not have the final animation from the mocap set that's been resolved, but we can focus on these performances. And this can happen at many different stages. It can happen right after VO and go off that way, or it can happen at the end of the process that's there. And we replace that existing performance. We now have on-screen scripts, so the actors don't have to memorize this. They're lip syncing existing performances. So if we had another actor that was doing a vocal performance, this actor in facial performance is not actually voicing anything. They're just performing and they're using their face. This helps us with problems that we see sometimes, because on set, when we're recording full performance capture, not only do we have vocal problems besides fidelity issues, but we have problems with misspoken lines, or another big problem is over-articulation. So you'll see some actors who are trying to get a performance, and they kind of over-articulate with their face, and it looks sometimes a little hilarious when they're on the cameras, and it's just the actor is trying to express themselves or get a certain vocal texture, but from a facial perspective, it's not useful to us. So, and as directors, we can't always see that because we're paying attention to so many things, which now means that we're having to replace, yet again, the face and other elements that's there. You do have limited head movements sometimes in both on camera and off, so this allows you to sort of work on a different placement, have the actors have the freedom to be able to move around, and they are also sometimes physically speaking the lines just so they're performing naturally, but now one actor can do multiple performances, multiple actors that's there, and they can add life without overemphasizing the movement that was there initially. And this process is very unique because there's different processes, and one of the things that's really amazing, especially the way that this webinar came together, is Faceware, who has been in the business for so long, has refined a lot of their processes. And one of the projects that I'm working on had some limitations in terms of video capture and how some of this is brought together. And their new pipeline is actually making this process much more efficient for us in resolving data and capturing data and empowering these actors to deliver these great performances. And again, we're capturing dialogue potentially a third time. So in a traditional mocap situation, if an actor has a performance that we don't like, we only have one chance to fix that. In this process, we can now do it in pre-production, on set, and in an ADR process. So this comes together in a very nice way, and this can be refined, enhanced. We can look at this specifically and just focus on the face and get these very detailed performances. So we're gonna wrap up here in just a second. I'm gonna show you just a couple more videos, and then we're gonna open this up to some questions and some discussion here. Here's like two short examples. This one looks like this is a short one from Metro, and with this project it was very interesting because we had a very complicated, very long performance that the original actor would have a difficult time reproducing or even doing their own ADR. So we had facial experts come in and lip sync these very complicated long sequences. So we'll show you a little of the facial process now and show you how this works.
Cities are gone. Bandits, beasts all around. Lots of space across the Volga though. Plenty of opportunity. So I came here with my rail car full of trading goods, hoping to make a few sales on the way east. What a fool I was. I was lucky to get out alive.
And I'll show you one more video while we're here, if you guys will put up with me. This is another one, and we'll take a look at this one here.
Because I am gonna enjoy killing you myself.
All right, so we're gonna break that down. So there's a couple Cantonese lines in here too. Okay, so here's our first one. Let me let you hear it. Hello. Hello. Okay, here it comes. So here's the first one for reference.
I win. I win.
Okay, let's try it out. Okay, here it comes.
I win. I win.
And a little darker smile. That's it.
I win.
That's the one. We're gonna do that one. Take 3. That was awesome. All right. So, let's watch this next one for reference.
Now this is gonna make me smile.
It's a lot of breathing on this one too.
Now this is gonna make me smile.
So there you go. So a lot of fun. Very specialized actors to do facial cap is a great skill for actors to be able to sort of command these performances and do multiple languages and do different characters at that time. So it's actually a very powerful technique and great opportunity for actors. Just to kind of summarize this pipeline, it starts off with that cast recording, goes into the mocap and then into our facial replacement. And the big walkaways for you guys is to consider when you're looking at your projects is, can you benefit from Frankensteining your performances in these ways, right? Really look at isolating what makes that performance special. And if that comes from that ensemble cast and let them perform together, either together or remotely. Because of COVID, a lot of actors were not able to come together. So this type of performance and getting the vocal performance first has really benefited a lot of productions. Obviously, we're getting much higher audio quality. We're not having to ADR a lot of our stage performances. That rehearsal and pre-blocking really makes it an advantage and cost-effective for us. We have separated audio and different audio timing, so we're not shackled to a specific performance. We have the ability to combine multiple tracks and takes and now work on previs and animatics and using final audio that can go off into animation even before mocap is started. We can initiate that audio and facial pipeline early so that animation gets started. We continue to refine this and replace dialogue at multiple stages throughout the process. So we can then go back, change lines of dialogue if a script has updated or we have to cut a scene down, and we're not stuck in just what we had in mocap. So that's a little bit of our vocap process. And as I said, it's not meant to be as a replacement that's there. And there's many, many different ways. And we still love doing traditional performance capture in a variety of different ways and incorporating a lot of these elements that's there. But this has proved such a successful and beneficial thing for us and our clients that we're starting to use this now for live action, for other elements of animation, not just games, and has become a really great thing for our company. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and we'll open the floor up to some questions.
Thanks a lot, Keith. That was super informative. I love seeing all those clips, and I appreciate you going so in depth with everybody here,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we did get a bunch of questions in, but as Keith said, everybody out there, I know we've got a ton of people still watching, and not almost nobody's left. So I could tell everybody was really engaged with what you were saying there, Keith. But for all of you guys, check the panel. There's a questions tab. Feel free, whatever you want to write in there, and then I'm going to go through these with Keith. Keith, I wanted to start with the actors kind of set up here, because I know we have a bunch of people watching there, probably in the voiceover community and the actors world. Maybe you can talk through a little bit, and I know you touched on this, but a little bit more about how does this impact an actor's world? Is this like a better approach? Does this have to them breaking apart how they approach a scene into different territories? Like maybe a little bit more there.
As I mentioned that, all actors come from different walks of life. Some people come from a theater experience, which translates very well for performance capture because they are used to working on a stage and projecting naturally, working with other actors and performing with a projection with an audience that's traditionally at a distance. So if you look at a lot of how games are constructed, that audience is watching a screen, and these performers, especially in a first or third person perspective, that projection tends to match pretty well. The challenge is that actors learn how to perform differently. So actors who come from animation or anime are more musically oriented in the sense that they're looking to rhythm and timing and other types of restrictions. Theater performers are used to finding a grounding element and performing together. On-camera actors, even between film and television, have a much different experience in terms of how they approach their acting skills. So a lot of actors are cast because of their abilities, their vocal range, their history, their social media. There's so many different reasons why actors choose to get involved in acting. And sometimes they have very specialized technical skills that benefit different elements of this production. And so rather than just throwing an actor into a performance capture situation where they may not be used to memorizing lines, or they might not be used to doing physical stunts or other things, an actor can still find a really great career in the game industry, just focusing on doing dialogue or facial replacement or doing stunts or doing some of these different elements. So what we find is that we have a much better selection of actors and much happier actors that aren't being taxed beyond their normal training, all actors love this. Don't get me wrong. If you could do performance capture all day long, most actors would just choose to be there. But there are some physical limitations on what you can do, and I think that this process really opens this up to a lot of actors. On the facial side and the ADR side, I think it's probably one of the most technically demanding sides, because you have to have a very strong ear for timing, awareness of your facial and performance abilities, and regardless of your vocalization, you're still going to be performing along with these lines. So actors who can really learn the facial capture process, I think, may find a whole new career that they didn't know existed.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the timing aspect too, and the music. You were relating it to music and theater, because the pipelines, we've done this with just myself personally when we've brought in some actors. If they don't have that, it's almost honestly like performing with a band, where you know when you're going to come in, when your next line is, and what you've got to say at a certain beat. And some actors I've noticed are wonderful performers. They have a unique voice, but when it comes to this approach of matching another performance at the exact same cadence and timing, it's a whole specific skill set, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we found is that a lot of production has gone international. So you see a lot of production teams in Europe and in Asia and other people that are maybe working on performance capture, and then they're going to do a Western or English version of that. And sometimes they've recorded performers doing performances there, and that introduces another actor's performance that needs to be replaced on the US side. And sometimes not only is that from a timing perspective, so if they've done a whole bunch of stunts and action and motion that we now have to voice and add breathing to and motion and everything else that's there, but dramatically that language may introduce a musicality that sounds different to a Western ear. So like that one game that we were showing earlier for Sleeping Dogs that Travis Willingham was doing, Cantonese has a very musical sense to its language, and some words have multiple meanings just based on the inflection. And to a Western ear, something that goes up at the end of a phrase may sound like a question, whereas in a Western ear, going down is a little bit more definitive. So if an actor inadvertently steals the musicality of the original performance, it could change the intention of the performance for us. So we're not just talking about facial replacement for just, you know, a Western game, but when you get these international productions, that musicality of that performance is really important to learn the timing to make sure we're still hitting that without stealing the music, because you don't want to get into a parroting thing where you're just imitating the original performance, because that is going to change the intention. And then the directors are trying to work out, keep the timing, but not the musical side of it, and that's a challenge for actors. And so using that training is a really interesting part, and it's very successful when it works, but very challenging to learn.
You touched on a good point there, and we got a question that's relating to it, so I want to bring it up because it's a good segue. David Wolf asks, do these techniques affect doing redubbing into other languages?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that, you know, we're seeing this as an opportunity now to reanimate, and what we are doing on a lot of our big productions is trying to use this to take either ours into other languages or other languages obviously into English. And what happens is that you know, and I'm going to give you a very drastic example, but I like to give this example, is that if you had Christopher Walken and he did the original performance and you were going to replace him with William Shatner, right? Now you have two very well-known celebrities that have very different performance styles. And by doing so, you are going to change one performance based on the other. You know, it's going to be Christopher Walken's timing, but it's going to be William Shatner's voice. So William Shatner is not going to use his traditional cadence that he's known for, because he's going to have to follow Christopher Walken's. So that same kind of thing happens when we're talking about international productions, is that one actor may inadvertently bake in a performance that another actor is going to have to follow. So by allowing us to do a facial replacement in the end means that we don't have to dub it and follow existing mouth motions. One of the things that we find is that when we take something from a Russian performance or a Japanese performance, a lot of times you'll see open mouth E's and A's and O sounds at the end of a phrase. And most of the time we don't end with those type of facial motions in English. So that means you either have to rewrite the dialogue and change your creative script to now match this weird, you know, not weird, but exaggerated facial motion that doesn't, it's weird for a Western eye because we don't end like E like that unless that sound is meant to be that way. So it looks like it's a disconnect. And what we're finding is this facial animation allows us to localize projects both into English and to other countries, because now you can take those facial motions and make it look exactly to the language that that audience is expecting, and not have something that looks like it's been dubbed.
Very cool. Is there times where you're just capturing a specific face of the, is a client requesting a specific region of the face? Like, we want to keep the eyes and we want to keep how the performance is, but just retime the audio for the mouth for this like 3.5 second clip or something like that?
And I actually think that's actually a better way to go about things if the original animation was well done. So for example, on Yakuza Like a Dragon, just year or two ago, COVID's hard to tell when things happened right now, but Yakuza we just launched, I think we were just finishing it up before COVID had kind of locked everything down, and these amazing, beautiful performances of these Japanese actors on Like a Dragon, and I didn't want to change all of that and move all of that around. All I wanted is our actors to be speaking English. So we actually just focused on the lower jaw, the mouth and the lower jaw, and kept all the beautiful eye articulation, the eye movements. I thought that the animation team at RGG did such an amazing job of that, just focusing on this allowed us to localize that and keep those beautiful performances. So I think that's a very powerful technique that a lot of developers should consider.
Cool. I have a question here from Samuel Lawrence. It says, interesting process. Appreciate you talking about it. Regarding face capture, how does the eye line work if the face performance is captured in a cubicle? Are there any cues or eye lines, or is this all done in post?
It's a great question. We have that question every project. Sometimes we know our eye lines. And so the challenge is if a facial performer is reading a script because they have hundreds of lines to get through in a session, they're obviously looking forward with the cameras. That can be very distracting if your eyes are focused on a script and you're moving around and doing that, because that doesn't work. So sometimes that is treated in a post process. From my experience, most animators don't want us to capture the eyes because they do want that flexibility, or they have a tracking system where the player may be in one position and they want to auto track based on where the player is at. So fortunately, we don't usually address the eye movements. We have on very specific occasions, and in that case, we are actually placing marks within the studio, and the actor actually will flash memorize the line and then do their facial capture based on where those eye lines are. I would probably assume an animation supervisor will still want control in post over that. And that is a process that I want to continue to refine, but that's a great question and something that I think is going to be important for people to consider when they are doing this process.
Got a bunch of questions about like getting started. I'm trying to scroll through these and see everybody that's asked it. I know we had, well, I'll look for names in a minute to give proper credit, but what would you recommend as far as maybe an indie team or somebody that may not have the resources to run to a VO booth? Is this process applicable outside of your facility if somebody wanted to kind of take this and apply to their own production?
100%. I mean, almost every game production is going to need voiceover to some capacity. And I would say it's harder to do ADR than it is going to be to do traditional VO. So regardless, having a great performance that's going to inspire those performances in animation or otherwise, doesn't have to even be performance capture. Having that cast record and dialogue put together is very much how animation has been done for 150 years. So the idea that you are getting these great performances in VO, even with the team, even over Zoom, even outside of a voiceover studio, you're still going to get those performances. And it allows you to really workshop that as an actor, as a director, as an animation team. Everyone is going to get a very good sense of what that's going to be. And if you are so fortunate enough to be able to then bring that to a performance capture stage, or you're animating it yourself and you're not going to do it that way, it gives you something that's very grounded and allows you to work much more cost effectively. So I would say that for an indie team, this is probably a better gateway into traditional performance capture than thinking you have to save up all your money, go up and do it at the stage, and then realize you're ill prepared for all the post-production nightmares that companies like mine have to deal with. So this is a really nice way to start that. And then in the end, even with face capture, you can do this on a very limited basis. A lot of my actors have been doing this during COVID at home. So a lot of face capture systems have been sent privately to the actors in their home. And then animation team or director or performance director can actually supervise that individually as long as the actor has a headset that's been calibrated and set up for them. So I think, just from my perspective, that it may seem a little daunting at first because of the Frankenstein nature of what we're doing. But in the end, I think it actually is a better opportunity for smaller teams that don't have the larger resources we do on our big AAA games.
Gotcha. I have another question here just about the actual animation portion, which I'm going to pass to you, but it might come back to me. But it says, Keith, how do you animate everything after you get all of these videos together?
Oh yeah, I'll pass that to you in terms of that. We're for this, we're going to be, when we look in the studio side of things, we're mainly capturing video and audio assets. So from an animation perspective and resolving and bringing that in, that is something that what we're trying to do is make it as detailed, as efficient, and as beneficial to an animation team. So we're handing off assets, they're getting exactly what they want. And so yeah, I think Max, I would gladly tee that off to you.
That's perfect. Yeah, it's more on the Faceware side because we make the software that then takes the video files and starts turning that into motion data and queuing it into the retargeting and the animation world for the animators to use it. So I love working kind of with Keith here in the idea of whatever we get from your team is going to be perfect for how we already know the specifications for the video is going to be framed really well. The audio is already embedded. We got time code reference. The clips are exactly what we need. This takes a lot of the guesswork out of our world when it comes into the animation portion, or getting the clients, getting whoever the animation team is and the game team exactly what they need to start what they do. So appreciate you asking that question there. But I'm seeing a handful of other questions too about, I guess you were doing some classes. You have to forgive me, but I have one from Jonathan Ha here who says, are there any plans for PCB classes to return?
Oh, so we teach a technical game acting class called Are You Game? And that is specifically for actors, and we're actually gonna have a new version of that for producers as well. But Are You Game specializes in teaching different aspects of how actors can perform. So we talk about not just the business of working as an actor in the game industry, but how to do battle chatter when you're screaming, battle chatter lines for Call of Duty, or if you're going to be doing facial capture or vocap, or you're going to be doing different types of techniques of echo repeat or timelines. And so one of the things that we've done over the past several years is start to introduce these classes for actors to come in studio, work with us and train, and then also do workshops after their training to kind of do workouts. Unfortunately for someone like us, we're in production so much that adding our classes, these are like 6 different classes that run 3 to 5 hours. So our schedule has been very difficult, and we're hoping to introduce some before the end of the year. Most of these have about a year-long waiting list, and they sell out within the first hour. So if you come to our PCB site, it's PCBProductions.com or r-u-game.com, but PCB Productions will take you there. If you go to PCB Productions, there's a sign-up sheet there, and I highly encourage any actors or producers who want to learn more about that to get on our sign-up list. And we do private email blasts to our community and let them know what we're doing, and we also do other community events. And you're going to see in the future, we're going to be very, very active with both the community of actors, but also with the unions, talking about how facial capture and AI and some of the deep fake technologies that are coming out are going to affect the performances and this technology that we've been using, and also working with producers on best practices to work with directors and actors in the studio. So when they want to bring in all these great talented actors, how to sort of organize their assets to come in so they're not wasting money before they get to the studio.
Yeah. Great point. We're just about at time here. I just want to squeak in one last question for you, Keith, before we say goodbye. Yeah. But this was asking, what are the applications for this outside of games? I think that, yeah, go. I'll let you answer this. Obviously,
I'd start and I'll tee off of you. You go for it.
I was just going to say, it feels like what we've talked about here, or what you've talked about, and what I've heard you present on, is that this kind of application, if you're doing any sort of creative medium with digital assets, feels like if you start with the audio first, you can kind of build that into anything that is using digital characters. But I don't know, is there a film application here? Is there something else that I'm not thinking of?
Well, I mean, once you start tracking actors, I mean, I think you're seeing global productions like we talked about. So, you know, Netflix and other companies are starting to not only distribute worldwide, but we're also licensing great, amazing projects from other countries. So I think that we're starting to look at this application for revoicing and refacing characters, and everyone's taking a different approach to it. Ultimately, because of the definition of the animation and creating models and animating and using these performances is, even if you're not dependent on just revoicing something and it's just on the refacing side of things, I think you're going to see this working its way into blending together these international productions and animation productions to make it much more beneficial to be able to make the dialogue exactly what the creators and writers wanted, as opposed to have to adapt. And I think that's going to be a big change creatively for our environment, because we're not just trying to make something fit the flaps, as it would be called. We are now inventing all new performances, and I think that's very liberating for writers, for directors, for actors, performers, for animation supervisors, for teams as a whole. And I think it's an amazing time for us to be able to explore this, because we're just experimenting with new pipelines that are making things better for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great way to end it too. Keith, I want to thank you so much for joining us and talking through everything. I let you know that there's a lot of people that have written in, not questions, but just comments saying they love you and thank you so much for talking through all of this with us. So at the end of this, if any of your comments that I didn't get to, we're passing all of them over to Keith, so he has them directly. So Keith, feel free, reach out to folks and answer any of these that we didn't have time for today directly.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And you know, we're always in production, so I apologize if I can't get back to everyone personally as much, but we're always open to questions and improving. And you know, the big walkaway from this is that this is not like we're saying this is the next thing, you know, since sliced bread. We're saying that, you know, this is an open discussion. We're constantly incorporating new technologies and new pipelines and new methodologies and new performers and performance techniques to make this all come together. This is very much a team that comes together in our industry, and so it's not the creative vision of just one person. It really has to be this team. So we welcome, you know, all sorts of new ideas, and if we can incorporate that and grow this, then that's the success of our industry.
All right, well, let me leave it there. And everybody else, just let you know, we're going to be posting the recording of this soon. So if you will have that up on our socials. Keith, I'll absolutely send it to you too, man, so you can send it to everybody on your side. But everybody out there, thank you so much for joining. Keith, I can't thank you enough for joining us too and giving us your time. So with that, I'll say goodbye to everybody, and thanks, Keith.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, guys. We'll see you soon.